Christian, how are you today? What's going on?
I'm doing all right. We're getting ready to, you know, figure out exactly what Holy Week and Pascha are going to look like here. Um, you know, but thank God that it's still happening and that it's more than a service, but a deep reality.
Yeah, totally.
A
Totally.
cosmic reality.
A very cosmic reality.
The most cosmic.
The most hypercosmic reality.
The
Boom, roasted.
metabolism. Oh
I
man,
win.
I can't
I
even
win.
I can't do this right now.
Good night, everybody.
It's still
Podcast
morning over
over.
here. It's still morning over here. I'm still waking up.
have you been
Give me a second. You what?
caffeinated yet? Have you been caffeinated?
Oh, I've been duly caffeinated, perhaps even over caffeinated.
Okay. This podcast is going to be brought to you by the Shakes.
What are you enjoying over there?
Right now, I'm enjoying a little bit of Greek mountain tea, something soothing and warm. And I had my morning coffee, and then I'm going to have my afternoon coffee after this. Just all kinds of beverages.
Just coffee for every time of day. Coffee in the
That's right.
morning, coffee in the evening, coffee at supper time. When coffee is on a bagel, you can have coffee anytime.
Fun fact: I have had relatives who would dip their bread into coffee, so it is theoretically possible to have coffee on a bagel and for it to be delicious.
I mean, it's like the donut coffee dipper.
Yes, although I've had family who does it with just like bread.
That seems uninteresting to me.
Oh, say more about how this is not adequate for your conversational standards.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I meant. What I meant was as a culinary delight. I don't know that I would be interested in that.
Oh, you're right. It's not good.
Yeah.
It is more of a fun fact than a fun experience.
Yes, I believe that. I truly believe that.
Yeah. I don't know. That's my sort of completely irrelevant anecdote for the afternoon.
How's life in quarantine for you?
Life in quarantine is going okay. Work has been busy the last couple of days, so I haven't been out for a walk in a couple of days. And I also did something to my left heel during my afternoon walks. So I've been kind of hobbling for the last couple of well, here, I'll show you what's wrong.
Are you doing like high intensity interval walking or something? Like what? How does one hurt one's heel on a walk?
I'll show you why I hurt my heel. Look, these are my sneakers.
Steven, no.
I didn't realize. Yeah, they have no heels because I've had them for a couple of years, and I just I've worn them down so there's literally holes in the bottom. I ordered new ones.
Good. I'm very proud of you. This was a very grown-up decision that you made.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you living your best life now that you're in quarantine.
That's right.
Sometimes it takes a quarantine to make you examine things, to be like, do I need new shoes? Probably.
The answer is yes.
Not that I'm going anywhere, really. But now it's like the difference because you're like, oh, I'm finally going somewhere. And did you step on something?
The ground, repeatedly.
That's it. You would have been a terrible Native American.
Oh, and how?
Running through the bush hills in bare feet.
Yes, leisurely walk, Steve. If that.
Yeah.
If that.
Walks with the sloths. That's what that's what your Native American name would have been.
Walks with the sloths.
Walks with sloths. Yeah.
Walks behind sloths potentially.
What? Catches up to sloths.
Yeah. Stops
Guys,
too often.
Wait. Oh, that'd be a good one. Hello, stops too often.
Let's get a move on. Stops too often.
Yeah.
How's your life in quarantine? Are you adequately shod?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really need to be shod. It's good. We're all just doing the best we can. I think the romance of it kind of at first it was exciting, oh, what's this gonna be like, and how are we gonna right? But now it's we're kind of settling into just oh, this is life now. This is kind of not that it's normal because there's nothing normal about being kind of scared to go to the grocery store. Yeah. But there, I think there is just a sense of oh, this is what we're under and we'll be under this for some time, and it kind of is what it is, and we're gonna try to make the best out of it that we can. So we've tried to do things like go on like family bike rides and stuff every day, and just get a chance to kind of like do some fun stuff. And like I've been reading Harry Potter to the girls every night, which has been great because like often I'm away, either for like our work trips once a month, or I'm out at like the therapy office seeing clients late at night a couple nights a week. So it just gets hard to like have any real kind of rhythm. And now
Mm,
I feel like we're kind of finally getting into one, which is nice. So
that's super
I'm
cool.
yeah, I'm happy about that. I'm happy about that.
That's super cool. So you're using this as an opportunity.
I'm trying. I'm
Mm,
trying. Not all the time. I definitely am a struggling pilgrim through this, just like anybody else. That's for sure.
yeah.
Um, I don't never been through like a global pandemic before. I don't know about you, but uh, to
Back in the
try
summer of
to
1635.
yeah, exactly. But just trying to keep my head up as much as possible. I know like none of us is getting the Posca that we're gonna want, so you know like even
Yeah,
if
totally.
even if you go to the services, like you're still going to be there like with three other people or whatever. So that it's just weird. All of it's weird. There's nothing
It's
about
totally
this
weird.
that's like normal. I don't know. It is what it is.
Totally. Totally. And that's why we put out the latest episode of Be the Bee. I don't know if folks have had a chance to check that out. The feedback's been really good so far. Just seeing if there's a way to like even look at the situation with the eyes of a bee and treat it as an opportunity for repentance and treat it as an opportunity for, we didn't use the word in the episode, but just sort of seeing this as like a period of exile and using it as an opportunity for mourning and for longing and for kind of these difficult but constructive emotions and sort of spiritual postures that can hopefully pull us back into this. Because I think a thing that I'm realizing, a thing that I'm seeing sort of online with people, it's like, man, you really do take things for granted when you can go to the store whenever you want, and when you can go to the services whenever you want. And the thing that I'm sort of coming to grips with is like my own sort of desire for the services is like, man, I wish I can go to church. And all the times
Mm.
when I totally had that option and just sort of whiffed on it and made excuses. So it's been, for me, it's been a very kind of difficult and eye-opening experience. I think in the past week, I've had a little bit of grumpiness about a couple of things as well. You really get a chance to see the ways that we're sort of underprepared as a church in some ways, as a society, right? Just kind of like things that have fallen through the cracks, leadership that hasn't sort of been at the level you might want. So me being kind of critical and whatever, I've been focusing on that probably the last week a little bit more than I should, but I've got to take that finger and sort of point it back at me and realize this is an opportunity for like my repentance and
Mm.
my opening rather than my wagging a finger at
Right.
the world.
Yeah, I mean that I feel like that, it's part of that Lenten prayer, right? Of like help me to see my own sin, not to judge other. Like that is such the hard thing here. I feel like there's tons of ways that we could just look at the outward world and kind of like, well, that guy's not wearing a face mask, and that like there's just so many opportunities, I think, to see how people aren't handling things the way we would.
Yeah.
And to like put ourselves above that. But I think like you're saying that if we really, and I think it's probably particularly tempting to do that because we are stuck inside with ourselves and have no other real escape from that anymore. Like maybe we
Yeah.
used to go to the bars, or we used to like go to coffee shops or socialize too much or whatever. But now we're kind of like stuck with no other recourse but to judge other people and not take a look at ourselves. It's amazing how much we're willing to not examine ourselves.
Totally. Totally.
Me no
And
likey.
yeah. And all of that's going to be more intensified with Holy Week coming up. Because that's kind of the home stretch. And I think like these senses of longings are going to be that much stronger. And maybe some of that sense of judgment and frustration is going to be that much stronger. So hopefully the Be the Bee episode helps people. We're putting together a little video, some other folks, department directors, which should come out later today, the day we're recording this, not the day the audio version comes out. And a website. We're putting together a Holy Week website, so check out our social for that stuff, and check out the video. Just kind of like four kind of things to keep in mind as we go through this very unusual and very challenging and very difficult and very unexpected Holy Week. Yeah, so look for that. That'll be coming out sometime later today. What else is going on? What other items of follow up from last time?
I think we're just still kind of moving on with our podcast in general, just trying to keep doing the normal thing. That's really all that we can do, So Wandering the Desert still coming out. We Are Orthodoxy still around. But beyond that, I think trying to move to sort of, I've been liking moving to some of the more kind of live stuff that we're doing. Like even with this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But still to release it like on a kind of like a normal format for us on Three Ancient Faith or whatever. It's been cool. Plus like the silence workshops that we've added a couple times a week has been really, really cool to be able to just take a time to like, for me, even just, it's like, it helps me slow down to be like, oh, well, you got to go do this thing for 15 minutes,
Yeah. I've really enjoyed just kind of sitting through yours and being led through that for a couple of minutes. Like for me, just personally, not even leading it, but being a participant in yours has been great. And if anything, I think we might multiply them for Holy Week because I think they have been so spiritually fruitful for us and a lot of people. So maybe we'll do them daily potentially for Holy Week. Not for the sake of like doing more media, because this is a conversation we've had as well. Like it's not about doing more stuff for Holy Week. Like Holy Week is going to have enough services and enough stuff in it as well. So I think we're going to kind of pull some things back, but maybe like a silence workshop, which is not, media in this normal sense of the word. It's just an opportunity to be still. And that's something that's going to be maybe that much more helpful during Holy Week. So again, keep an eye out on our website and social for all that sort of stuff. Podcast's going well. Videos are still happening. Effective Christian Ministry, people are still registering for that. This is a great opportunity to take a moment and like think about ministry and learn about ministry and challenge yourself about ministry. I think especially since we're all kind of trying to be creative and figure out how to do things in a very different context, right? So effectivechristianministry.org. The feedback is still really, really wonderful. It's really helpful for people. Christian and I spent a lot of time on it and we're really proud of it. So take advantage of that if you haven't had a chance to register for that yet. Anything else? Follow-up wise?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that we kind of maybe at this point need to stop and kind of do this new thing that we've been trying at the beginning of these podcasts, is maybe discussing a couple things that we're grateful for. So what's something you're grateful for this week, Steve?
I am grateful for leaders and leadership. I think maybe this is kind of my own sort of like frustrations and my own kind of inner thought of like having to solve or whatever. It's really been inspiring for me in big ways and little ways to see people who are just kind of leading the church through these difficult times. And sometimes it's like very small ways. Like I said, like you leading the silence workshops every Monday has been a great source of just comfort and I think spiritual health for me every week. So I'm grateful for you as a friend, as a leader. I'm grateful to the other sort of ministry leaders out there that are our friends that we work with, lay people, clergy, whatever it is, just people who are continuing to preach the gospel, continuing to offer comfort, continuing to offer challenge, continuing to offer joy, just the people who are like, again, who are still evangelists and who are still preaching and teaching and being intentional Christians and not reacting, right, to kind of stuff in the world, but kind of like leading the world into God's kingdom. And I think we're seeing a lot of the difference between sort of the superficial, not actual leadership, but kind of, if I'm going to be a little bit cynical, sort of media, just communication stuff, and actual Christians being actual Christian leaders. So I'm grateful for the real deal. Yeah.
I feel that. And I'm also really grateful to not be in a position of leadership where I have to make any decisions. Like I'm very glad about that. Like I could not imagine bearing the burden of those leaders. No, thanks. And mine's going to be maybe really kind of silly, but it is what it is. So I've been really grateful lately for breakfast potatoes. Like we've been eating breakfast potatoes over at our house, and that's been really great. They've been so tasty and so enjoyable. And I think getting to the point a little bit where I'm like, all right, no church, no good food, no, like, and by no good food, I mean no meat. Because our food is still delicious, but it's just like enough with the vegetables already. So I think finding something that's like, oh man, these are so good because they've been so crispy and like warm and
ooh.
Yeah, they've been really, really nice. So
You had
I'm
me at
grateful for
crispy.
breakfast. Yeah, I'm grateful for breakfast potatoes, and also for my bike still. So
You
I
can't
like my
cheat. You
bike.
can't be grateful for the same thing. That's cheating.
Don't boss me around, boss.
Don't be a leader.
Yeah, don't be my don't boss me around just because you're my boss. That doesn't make
Forgive me.
sense.
Yeah, I know. I know. Um,
What if I
that's
was
good
like,
stuff.
well, God forgives you. I'm gonna hold on to that though. I'm gonna keep tabs on you.
That's right. In the fullness of time, you will be forgiven. But for now, watch your back.
For now, you're gonna have to make it up to me.
Yeah. And thus a sitcom ensues.
Yes, exactly. Well, shall we
Steven,
get to the thing?
let us get to the thing. What is the thing
Let's
this
do the
week?
thing. The thing this week is Bwam. Bwam.
Oh, that bass is really cranked up.
Bwam. It is Inception.
I feel it in the back of my throat. That just sort of,
Good.
wah. Yeah.
Was it more like a tickly sensation, or was it like a resonating one?
It was like a heist. A heist in the back of
Heist.
my throat. Yeah.
What did it? What was being heisted?
Spoiler alert. Well, question. Actually,
Dreams.
before
I'm a
so
dream thief.
yeah, that's what I do. So I'm questioning about this before we get into sort of the summary for the week. Maybe this is kind of an interesting little tangent, or maybe it's just interesting for me. Inception is not that old of a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we release the spoiler porg for Inception? Because it's not like super new, but it's also not super old. You know, like where does it fall into this like statute of limitations when it comes to spoilers?
I mean, I think it's like 10 years. I think is that. I mean, it's 10 years old.
That's like a millennium in pop culture time,
isn't it? Like things, like we're way beyond that now. We're way past Inception.
That's right. That was pre-corona. That was so long ago. I noticed this, by the way, when I was watching the movie last night, like when they're on the train and they're walking around in crowds. It's like, oh yeah, crowds, places.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be nostalgia, but it was kind of nostalgic.
Yeah. And then when she touches the glass, you're like, no, don't touch that. Don't
Yeah.
even touch that. Don't do that.
That's right. Wash your hands for 20 seconds immediately after touching any surface outside.
Well, so to answer your question, maybe it's not necessarily worth a full-on spoiler porg, because that's still like a relatively new kind of spoiler alert, but it might be worth a like Ewok yub.
Let's do it then. Let's unleash it.
Did you get the yub?
I did get the yub. So I think in terms of how one interprets or receives that yub, it is not a strong sort of spoiler porg. It's just kind of like meh, maybe spoilers, like meh. It's kind of a meh warning. It's not really a warning. It's like it's a shrug, is what that is. That was a pop culture shrug, is what that was.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. Well, now that we've shrugged, now that we're off on such a dynamic foot, should I open up with a little summary about Inception?
Yes, please do.
Now that we're within spoiler shrug territory.
Yep.
So in a nutshell, it is one of the very well-known and sort of critically acclaimed movies by Christopher Nolan of the Batman trilogy and many more. And so Inception is about this guy Dominic Cobb, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio of Growing Pains fame. Remember Growing Pains?
I like that. That's his claim to fame for you.
Yeah, it's all been downhill since Growing Pains.
Yeah.
Show me that smile again.
The Departed, no good. Just really anything that he's been in has been awful.
Titanic, overrated, but Growing Pains.
It's amazing that guy has any work.
He knows Martin Scorsese, apparently. He gets a lot.
Yeah.
And Christopher Nolan. So he plays Dominic Cobb, who is a thief, as we alluded to in sort of our spoiler alerts. He steals dreams, basically. He's a thief who sneaks into people's minds to steal secrets. It's like corporate espionage taken to this really sort of interesting level. And at the very beginning of the movie, he gets caught trying to steal into the mind of a Japanese businessman named Saito. But it turns out that it was actually kind of a test. It was sort of a dry run because Saito wanted Cobb to break into the mind of a corporate rival a man who was inheriting this like this conglomerate from his father, a business that was too big for them to compete against, and he wanted Cobb to incept an idea into the young man's mind, which is where the name
Which
of the
is
film comes from.
a crazy thing, right? Because
That's not how the Force works.
We'll get into that. Because it might be in the movie anyway. So he tries to do that, and then so he puts together his team, and they do this. And in order to do that, they have to go through like these multiple levels of dreams, and time works differently in these multiple levels. And the whole time, Cobb is dealing with residual guilt from his wife, who he actually incepted at some point in the past, and she ended up killing herself as a result because she couldn't tell the difference between reality and these dreams. And so it's kind of like
she killed herself.
Well, depends on how you read the ending of it, right? Like, did they ever get out of it? Did it happen in a dream? Was it all a dream? As Biggie said, right? As Biggie famously asked, it's all a dream.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was, he stated it. He didn't really ask it. But anyway, that's what happened. It's a layered sort of movie that is like this heist movie with one man's kind of psychological journey, playing with space and time and dreams and stuff. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was good. It was good. And, you know, I think like the whole thing of like the shared dreams, like people can kind of stick together in a dream. You know, it's really important because Leo looks around and he says, now you may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not
the only one.
Yeah. So I was really excited to watch this movie again because I haven't watched it probably for like 4 or 5 years. And it's still like just as fun and intense and you know, interesting as I remember. Like so many cool just like dynamics between kind of like the upper layers of the dream and then the lower layers of the dream and how they affect one another. Like even the driving of the I mean, it starts to get really confusing in some levels because I'm like, where, like, why do they need kits to go into like lower levels of dreams? Like that's where I start to get a little confused about like the exact way that this plays out, like the dream within the dream, and like,
Yeah,
I don't know, it just gets confusing. It's like my brain doesn't work that way. But it's still like I get it kind of from that meta level of like, okay, I dream within a dream, but then like the hows, I'm just like, oh, okay, never mind. But it's still so good. I think it has a lot to maybe show us about kind of like human consciousness and like the inner workings of the person. And so I'm excited to talk about it today. How was it going? You'd seen it before, right? This wasn't the first time.
Definitely saw it before. I saw it when the spoiler statute of limitations was still fresh, way back in the day. And then I watched it again last night, and I finished it actually this morning. And it's fun. It's like, it's definitely quirky. I love the way that it tries to visually represent very weird things about inner states, like memories and emotions. And it's kind of this very interesting, like physically allegorical thing that's trying to present dreams and mental states and emotional states and stuff like that, with some very dynamic visuals. I mean, I kind of forgot how cool the heist bit in the hotel, right? When like the van is going off the bridge and like, you know, they're crawling through the hallways as the hotel is spinning around them. I mean, really cool effects that really just transport you into this with a really interesting story that's kind of powerful. There are moments, I think, when I have that kind of like, is this a little bit convoluted? Like, is it a little bit too much? But all in all, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad to have watched it again because it was visually powerful. It was interesting. And I think it's going to provoke an interesting conversation today. So yeah, definitely a thumbs up.
Yeah. Awesome. It was, part of the reason I thought that it was kind of like it would be a fun one to pick a little bit. Is sort of for the same reason like that I thought Groundhog Day would be kind of a good idea, right? Of like, oh, it's kind of just this like questioning of like what's real anymore, and like what like there's like a part of this that's sort of this whole quarantine thing that does sort of feel like being stuck in a dream, or you know, just something that feels like you just keep kind of hoping you're going to wake up and everything's going to go back to like normal.
Yeah.
Or something. So I do like that idea. And to me, like one of the big things that like you kind of have playing throughout the entire, you know, movie is like, you're never really 100% sure what's a dream and what's real, and like what's happening where, you know, you have to kind of remind yourself, oh wait, the van, like they're in a plane. Like that's what's happening. Like they're actually in a plane. And so all of this is happening not in, the streets of LA, not in, the the winter wonderland of this like bunker or whatever. So
That was
does
totally
begin,
like a level out of GoldenEye, by the way.
oh, it was 100% a level out of GoldenEye, and like I could hear the music like. Dun, dun,
I love that. It's all very realistic. It's all like cities and places, and then suddenly we're in GoldenEye, and it's like, yes, okay, we're doubling down on how kind of like weird this is.
Yeah, totally. We've never done a James Bond movie. We should do the new James Bond movie when that one comes out.
Yes, yes.
If we ever are allowed to go to movie theaters again, which I'm not crossing my fingers. So, yeah, I mean, I think that what this does bring into question is that basic question of how do you ever know that what you're experiencing is real? Because I mean, we've all had that experience with the dream where you wake up screaming and you're like, oh, it felt so real. And then you really think about it and you're like, wait, but, and like Steve was in it, but he didn't really look like Steve, but like I knew it was Steve. And it's a really bizarre thing that like our brains do. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love the whole question of like, what's real?
Yeah. Which not to be sort of philosophy nerd over here, right? But like that is a guiding question that's at the core of so much Western philosophy over the course of the last couple of hundred years, which is interesting, right? Not to sort of like connect the dots a little bit too much, right? But even if you go to Rene Descartes and some of his stuff in terms of like radical skepticism, like Age of Enlightenment stuff, trying to construct a world without God, essentially, which is where a lot of those like philosophical constructs come from. Like Rene Descartes, I can't assume that anything is. I can't assume anything, and he sort of like just goes down to the very fundamental question, and he sort of realizes like even he doesn't know that he himself exists, and he kind of does a little bit of a rigmarole to get around that, which is one of the sillier parts of Descartes. At some point, right, like just to function in the world, if nothing else, like there has to be some baseline ground level. Okay, this is, and we can sort of work out from that, right? There has to be like something upon which I can grab. Otherwise, I'm in constant like zero gravity, like free for all. Like that gets crazy when you think about it, big picture philosophy wise. But like that question, I think, is really embodied or symbolized with the totems, right? Because that's kind of their one sort of grasp on some sort of objective reality. And like the totems, right? The totems are something that each of them individually makes themselves, a weighted die, a top with a particular kind of spin to it, whatever it is. And they carry it on themselves. And the goal is to not let anybody touch it or mess with it, because like only you know the properties of this thing. And so if it's your loaded die, you roll it. And if it kind of comes up the right way, you have some assurance that, okay, like this is real. I'm now anchored in the real world. Which is interesting, right? It's like some level of physicality, some level of materiality becomes their kind of grasp on what is. Right. And it's this tiny little foothold, but it's the only thing they have.
Right. What's interesting there too is that like in the therapy world, like one of the primary kind of things that you need to do with somebody like who's experiencing high levels of like emotional dysregulation is just get them grounded in the present moment. And so like sometimes the way that you do that is it's like, I mean, we all have those moments where we get kind of, and like, I really don't like the word triggered anymore, because I just feel like it's overused about so many things. Like, oh, that just really triggered me. And it's like, but sometimes you really do get triggered into these kinds of like other parts of you that are like super reactive and survival based and all of that kind of stuff. And so you start responding to a threat that's not really present, as if you're like reliving a memory or reliving a dream or like some sort of like trauma thing, which is, I think, also a really important part of this movie is the role of memory and the role of trauma and the role of loss and all of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But one of the things you need to do is to help someone realize like, okay, you're responding to this as if you were back in your 6-year-old self. And now what we need to do is kind of like get you back into this present moment. Like, look at the wall around you. I'm not your dad. I'm not right. Like we're here right now. That was then. Right now you're here. And right now, then you couldn't do anything. Now you can. And like that, all of that begins to help someone kind of get grounded back in the present. And even part of what you do is like, okay, notice like where you're feeling that sensation in your body right now. Like as you get triggered, right? Like what's happening in your body, like, well, my heart's pounding. even that is inherently grounding because it's helping me tune into what's happening here, what's happening right now. So to even get present here, or to like touch, the chair that I'm sitting on, and to like let myself feel that it's there. Like, okay, I'm back now, and I'm still, elevated a little bit, but I'm not totally dysregulated like I was,
Yeah.
Before. So I thought that was a very, like, I don't know, like helpful kind of image, like the totem thing. And I just kind of kept thinking, like, what for us, like as Christians, like how do we really, like, what's our totem, and like how do we use our totem correctly? I mean, I think you could easily just say like, well, it's the church, or like, oh, it's Holy Communion, or oh, it's the scriptures, or whatever that might be. But I don't know. It just got me kind of thinking, like, when we're cut off from the church, or when we're not able to go to like Holy Week in Pascha, or to do any of those kinds of things like we are right now, like, how are we supposed to stay grounded? Part of, for me, like the rhythm of going to church every Sunday is kind of like an inherently grounding rhythm. But now to have that stripped away is kind of like, I mean, we still do the live streams on our computer, but it doesn't
different.
feel, it doesn't feel like we get ready, we still put on all our church clothes, and the girls like do their hair and put on their dresses, and everyone's really cute, and I don't know, but it's like there's something that makes me wonder, like, what do I have to hold on to now? I don't know if you feel that way at all.
No, I think that's a great question. And I think to sort of link it with, so I guess some of the deeper anthropology that's there, and I think why that's such like an important question. I think it's, there's a layer of the kind of advice that we get from the church to avoid the imaginings, right? Like the things in our own mind and our imagination that pull us away from reality, which I think like in the therapy space, right? Like that very much comes up when you are dealing with a person, but you're not really dealing with the person. You're sort of reliving a trauma that existed in your past, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are ways that we sort of like pull ourselves out of what is real. And it could be because of trauma. It could be because of our own sort of overactive imagination, right? It could be because of our pride. It could be because of demonic influence, right? I mean, like there's totally like that sort of thing to be worried about as well. There are things that pull us out of reality and pull us into some level of imagination or imaginary kind of constructed reality. And I think really the two things that I can think of that are so, like there's two dimensions to our totems that I would like toss out. I think there's kind of the personal totem, which I think really is like our physicality, which is kind of this objective, like given thing. I mean, I think that's why so much of the prayer tradition of the church like does have this level of like mindfulness at the very beginning, to just sort of sit and be still, and to sort of get out of your own head, to sort of like be aware of what actually is, rather than your own sort of negative thought cycles, your own kind of imaginings and your cartoonish sort of caricatures of people, whatever it might be. So there's that, like the sort of the personal discipline of stillness, because reality sort of breaks in and calls out of this stillness. And then this horizontal thing of just like the rest of the body, both in a spiritual sort of level. It is grounding to sort of like have the rhythm of the church. It is grounding to have the nourishment of the sacraments. It is grounding to have like the fellowship of our fellow brothers and sisters, right? I think there's kind of like multiple layers to it, but it's like, I guess the basic question is, what draws us out of delusion and temptation and imagination and all the things that are not real, and all the things that can create these like thought spirals and pathologies and just kind of like stuff that pulls us out of what is. What are the things that ground us back into that? And on some level, I think it's the gift of our bodies, because so much of our imagining happens in our minds, right? The body in some sense is a gift because it's like, it just is.
Yeah.
It just is, in the same way that the totem just is. And the multiple layers of connection that we have to each other, sacramental, fellowship, discipleship, all that sort of stuff too. That's kind of what's coming to my heart.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're bringing up a good point too, because like, in our mind, we can construct any kind of reality that we want. And for some of us, that's a way more pleasant thing. And that's where it becomes like a dream. I think like we're a daydreaming kind of dynamic, or I'm thinking about like the people in that like dream bar or whatever, like that
Oh,
guy
yeah.
goes like, the dream became the reality. And it's like, okay, Jafar, like take it easy. Like, I don't know what's going on here and why you gotta be like crazy soothsayer person, but
Yeah.
like it's
Where's your
scaring
staff?
me.
Where's your
Yeah.
scepter?
Yeah. You scare me. So I think there is something to that of like, we maybe construct these narratives, or I mean, it's wild, man. Cause like I have these clients, for example, and I think like, I get to see into like kind of the narratives that people live in, um, narratives of abandonment and narratives of isolation and narratives of betrayal. And so they're kind of like always in that place of like, oh, he did this thing, he must be wanting to hurt me, or he did this thing, he must not care about me. And so they're always kind of looking to find like betrayal, or looking to find abandonment, or looking to find that kind of stuff, like that hypervigilance kind of thing, right? They're always, and they perceive like, oh, he did this, so like he puts everybody else before me, because he didn't go to the place that I wanted him to go to, he went to a place that he wanted to go to, so therefore he doesn't care about me. It's like, well, I don't know that that's necessarily true. Like maybe there was other things at play, but I think there's like one element of it that's that, and then another element where sometimes like our realities become so painful that we do everything we can to escape from them. And like I have this really, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but like I have a really kind of weird, like almost like psychological defense that starts to show up for me when I start to get into like moments of really expressing how I feel, or moments of really like coming to say what I want or need from someone. And or if I sit down to like, let's say I have a project that's really important to me, and like I really want to do something really, really, really well. Like I have a paper I need to write, or whatever. I sit down and I feel dizzy. I sit down and I start to feel sleepy, because like there's something that just comes out that's like, oh well, this is so intense and it's so meaningful that like I can't even bear showing up for it. It's like this really strange
Avoidance.
this dysregulation that happens, like, but it goes not into like anxiety, it goes into like
Yeah.
checking out. It's really weird.
Yeah, but I think that's common. So this is something that I will talk about during Be the Bee retreats, when we do like the silence workshop. And so we'll for 15 minutes, kind of like we do on the silence workshops that we're live streaming a couple times a week, just walk them through what it is to be still and walk them through prayer. And at the end of it, we'll talk about it, and I'll ask them like, for how many of you did that feel like an eternity? And a bunch of the teens will like raise their hands always. And we'll talk about that. Like, why is it that sitting still for 15 minutes provokes this, like, this is terrible, this is the worst thing? Or sometimes like you get sleepy and you nap, even though you're totally caffeinated like 30 seconds before that, right? All these things that sort of pull us out of the present moment, as opposed to how many times do you put on your favorite Netflix show and binge it, and you're just sort of there for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, or you're playing your favorite video game or reading your favorite book. Like, it's not just, time wasty sort of things. It's things that pull us out of our own experience into something that is not real in the same sort of way. And I think that's just one of the inherent challenges of like being a human, that reality is hard. And there are so many kind of psychological, emotional things that try to pull us out of that, whether it's, I'm going to take a nap rather than deal with this, right? Which I think a lot of people do. Like, you come home, you're sort of overwhelmed by the day. I need a nap. I'm not going to deal with my feelings. I want to escape them for a little while. Or I come home and I need a pint of ice cream. Or I come home and I'm going to veg out and just scroll on my phone for the next 3 hours and not talk to anybody. All of these things that are just kind of like avoidance mechanisms, or things that pull us out of reality. They're kind of anti-totems, right?
Yeah.
But reality is like, this is where God is. This is where neighbor is, like here in the present moment, in this particular time that we've been placed, in this particular place in which we have been placed. And yet it's so hard. It's so easy for us to imagine the past and remember the past and imagine the future, or just knock out or, distract ourselves for hours on end. Like, reality is really hard. And the struggle to get back to reality is kind of the underlying, like, it's hard sometimes to get back to reality, to cut through the dense forest of these bad thought patterns, or the avoidance mechanisms, or the whatever dysregulation, right? Like, it's hard to be in reality.
There's this Scottish priest monk named Father Seraphim, and he recently came to our parish out here, and he was just wonderful. And I was like, I want to hang around with you a lot, and
Won't you be my friend?
won't you be my neighbor? He was like, I live in Scotland, homie. He didn't say it like that. That's how I interpreted it. But what he has this thing where he talks about, like, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're just kind of up, and whether you have to go to the bathroom or kind of like whatever it is, but to go stand before your icons kind of in those moments when you do wake up, and instead of kind of, just go to the bathroom, like, use them as an opportunity for prayer. Especially if, like, you're kind of anxious, you wake up anxious or upset about something, but to go stand before your icons, maybe light a candle. And the way he says it is, like, you just say it to the Lord, this is who you must save. Like, this me. No, not some dream me, not some pretend me, but the me who is kind of revealed and tired in the middle of the night. This is the me that needs your saving. The me who I project into the world, the me that I pretend to be, or not even that necessarily that, like, these things about me are fake as in invented or made up, but they are false in the sense that I construct them as who I really am. Like, that's the fullness of me, but rather, like, all the parts of me, everything in me, like, this is who you must save. And I love that idea of kind of what you're saying of, like, coming to reality, right? Like, that's hard. I mean, it's again, it's that quote from Saint Isaac the Syrian that I've never been able to find, but is often attributed to him, of it is a greater miracle to see oneself as one truly is than it is to raise the dead. That, I mean, that's what, whoever said it was true, whether it was Isaac or not. Like, it, I don't care who said it. It's true.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's hard. And it's something that I wish I did last night, because I don't know if it's because of watching Inception. Like, I was having weird dreams, which I normally don't remember.
Dude, I was so messed up last night. I could not sleep. I was, like, kind of scared to go to sleep.
I had this weird dream where, for whatever reason, so I had, like, I live in an apartment, and there were mice in my apartment last summer, because, like, the building exterminators weren't doing a good job, and they were just coming in through the common places and whatever. So I've had this, like, anxiety about mice every now and again since then, because, like, what if they come back? What if now during the shutdown, like, the exterminators aren't doing their job? So I had this weird dream where there was, like, a hockey bag, I think, full of equipment that was also full of mice. And I had a spatula in my hand, and I was, like, trying to hit them in the bag, but I was very lamely sort of hitting them because I didn't want to squish them. And it was just this very sort of impotent, like, meh, why is this bag full of mice? Go away, mouse.
I don't want the mice.
And then I woke up, and I was just like, well, I'm up now. Might as well see what's going on Instagram. And I just kind of, like, so dumb.
Enter
I love
another
that
dream
though.
state.
Yeah, seriously, right? What a powerful advice, though. This is who you must save.
Yeah, it's so helpful to me to kind of to think of it in those terms, because, like, I think I spend, and probably all of us do, so much effort and energy trying to kind of be, like, saved already without being saved. Does that make sense? Like, we try to kind of, like, be these refined and ideal versions of ourselves, rather than recognizing, like, oh no, you actually can't do that for yourself. I mean, it's Eustace the dragon, right? Like, you can claw the scales away all you want, but they're going to keep growing back. You got to let Aslan get in there and tear you out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, yeah, you can scratch and scratch and scratch, and maybe it feels like you're doing something, and maybe it feels good even a little bit, but any real transformation only comes at the hands of God. Like, that's the only way that it can happen.
which is such a lesson for this Lent, right? Because there is so little that we can actually do.
Yeah.
We can't go to church and do the normal things. And I mean, there are other things we can do, right? But I think that's maybe an interesting way to interpret that and just be like, again, it's not about our scratching. It's not about our personal religiosity. It's like, how does this become an opportunity to call out to the Lord and ask
Right.
for him to do the work for us?
Well, and what's crazy too to me, like, I mean, not crazy, but I think we talked about this recently, even maybe when we did the Areopagus, but like the reality of what we're in is like, it's Lent and it's the beginning of April. And a couple of weeks ago, it was the middle of March / the end of March even. And there was kind of that move as things were happening, like, hey, let's all put up Christmas lights on our houses. And hey, let's like watch all the Hallmark Christmas movies. And there's kind of like this, again, like this entering into some altered dream state that is other than the reality that we're in, where it's Lent, it's the middle of March, beginning of April, and none of us can go to church. Like, that is our reality. And that's the reality in which God has called us to find him and to meet him. When it seems the most impossible, when it seems the most like, I don't know, man, like this is very much like Road to Emmaus kind of stuff, where we're like, oh, like we've been cut up and like we don't know what to do and blah 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 blah. And like some dude comes up to us and he's like, what are you guys talking about? And we're like, what, dude, don't you know, like it's Lent, we can't go to church. And he's like, well, wah. And then he kind of walks with us a little bit, and then all of a sudden I think we're going to be amazed and look back at it and be like, oh my goodness, like this was in his hands the whole time. Like all of this was in his hands. He was, caring for the vineyard that he had planted with his own right hand. Like this is part of the way that he did it. And maybe this is, I hate to say it, but a little bit of a pruning season. Like maybe I don't mean that necessarily just by like people dying or whatever, but like,
yeah,
maybe that too. I mean, I don't know, but like some sense of like, is the Lord pruning his church, in at the level of the heart? Is the Lord pruning right now to kind of like cut off in us those things that like we think are real but are not? It's maybe what, like, even what we talked about with like the leadership, because I've seen people get so upset at like church leaders for this or for that. I can't believe they're not letting us go to church, and people getting upset that like daycares are open for parents that need to send their kids there so they can go to work, but we can't open churches. And it's like, oh dude, like shut up. Like those people need to go to work. Like they're doing the best that they can, like those are essential services. And like, yes, in some real sense, like our church services are also essential services, but not in the same kind of like worldly capacity, right? Like we're all going to be able to kind of keep doing what we do, but we are so ready to like criticize or demand our rights or to be even disobedient. And like, I have a hard time like seeing Jesus be that way. Like I see like the one who's like, if there's any other way for this to happen, like let's do that, but not what I will, but what you will. And I mean, God help us, man. Like maybe this is the season where we just learn to like be less consumeristic, even in our approach to religion, right?
Totally.
Like I'm going to stay away from the thing that I want the most because that's what somebody told me to do. Like,
because you can't always get what you want.
Yeah. And you don't know what you had till it's gone.
Also true.
And I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
I do not have a song lyric to add to this.
But I do know that I'm looking for love in all the wrong places.
You, sir, you won. You won all of it. I think, again, I think those are really great questions, right? Especially for us as American Christians. And on this kind of like theme, right? As the last couple of days, I've been thinking about this too. Some of the questions that have existed in the church for a couple of years, even a couple of decades in situations like this, like in terms of this pruning, right? I wonder if there's a way to sort of like read things providentially in that way, right? You have, for instance, a lot of Orthodox parishes will sort of survive financially every year because they do their festival every spring, every summer, whatever it is. And there have been a lot of people over the last years, decades, whatever it is, who are like, that's maybe a great way to raise funds for a particular purpose, but it is weird for us to sustain our communities by relying on people outside of the community to throw cash at us, right? Is there a way that we can develop more of a sense of stewardship, more of a sense of like, we are cultivating the life of this community, not relying on buying and selling to do it? Like that can potentially be for a specific purpose, but like, why are we relying on commerce to sustain our communities? And now those things are gone, right? Like there are going to be no parish festivals and food bazaars this spring or this summer. And who knows, maybe not even this fall, right? So this kind of like weird sort of economic model that a lot of our parishes have used is being pruned, even though people have been asking this really good question for years and years and years. So I wonder, right? Is there something there to that? Is there something there to the people who've been asking the questions of, like how do are our ministries like really preparing young people to like be full members of the church when they grow up? And now we don't have those ministries anymore, right? We don't have youth group in the same way that we used to, and we don't have Sunday school in the same way that we used to. And now it's just like the life of the home. And if you don't live with anybody, like your own sort of like personal sort of spiritual practice. Right. And there's this pruning, right? And it's like, okay, people have been asking for a long time, like, maybe the direction of a lot of these ministries isn't the best possible thing. And now they're gone. And now we're sort of having this like crisis moment of like, okay, what does it actually mean to live intentionally as a Christian at home? I wonder if there's something prophetic about that. Like there's these questions that have been asked within the church over the course of the last years and decades. And now it's like, okay, what if we took those questions seriously and saw what happened?
And I think I said this on the on the Areopagus as well, but it's a thought that's been in my mind a lot. Is there's this line in one of Schmeman's journals where he says like that the mission of the church is not to reduce the experience of the kingdom to anything in this world, but rather to take the experience of the kingdom into the world and share it, but not to conflate it with something that's in the world. And I think that like that's kind of what we're up against. Like I think we have begun to think that like these temporal kind of manifestations and experiences of these eternal and divine events, that those themselves are the thing, rather than kind of like the icon of the thing. That the church is a sacrament of the kingdom, but it's the kingdom itself that exists above and beyond it that gives it its power. It's the kingdom of God that is kind of the reality in which the church participates fully and well. But to again confuse like the element for the thing itself, I think like we're now being tested there a little bit to be pushed a little further into kind of like, I don't know, longing for, because I do think that he means that when he says like should be reduced to nothing in this world, even like the church building, even the Paschal service, even the whatever, because only when we recognize those things for what they are as participations in these kind of divine and eternal events do they actually matter. Do they actually become something that we can revere and venerate, rather than something that we worship unto themselves. They can become idols. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that we're being have that stripped away from us.
Yeah. This is something our friend Christina is really into. Christina Andreessen, who's the director of programs at OCF. It's kind of a thing that she's been saying for a while, right? That like anything can be an idol if the idol doesn't point to anything outside of itself. Even good things, right? Can be idols. If they
especially good things.
Because on the surface level, it's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Like what's what's wrong with a Christmas movie in March to sort of get us through this, right? Like, I get it on some level as entertainment, but on the other hand, right, is this actually sort of pulling us away from some level of like reflection to God's action in the world right now and just sort of closing our eyes and plugging our ears? If the
humming jingle bells.
Yes. Yeah. Or again, in the church context, right? Like a lot of feedback that we get, and this is an axe that I've grinded many times, is the feedback we get on videos is like, you need to have Byzantine chant as the background music for the videos. It's too worldly to have, some other track as like a backing track. But it's like, is it actually more pious to have chant as background music on a video? Like complete lack of concern with the prayer that's actually being offered just because it sounds orthodox? Like, is that the chant pointing to itself at some point, right? Like you're not engaging with the words. You're not using it as an opportunity to actually call out to God. It's just background. It's music at that point. Like, that seems like an idol.
Yeah. And the same is true, I think, with like, and we've talked about this as well, like icons on shirts or icons on pamphlets or icons on this or on that. Like how many times have we thrown those kinds of things on the floor or into the pile of dirty laundry? Like, that's not where, like, iconoclasts would have been like, yes, they would have been
do it.
More. Like, yeah, leave that bulletin on the floor and step on it. That's right. Like, don't even think
throw it
about
on the ground.
Yeah. And then people are like, well, we can burn them afterwards. But even that confuses me. Like, so why are we making icons, like divine images of the Lord and his saints, with the express intention of we can kill them when we're done? Like, why? Like, when we're done using them, then we'll destroy them. It's like that doesn't make any sense to me. And like, if I see an icon on someone's shirt, I'm like, do I venerate it? Like, what do I do? Like, I don't know. Do I shake your hand? Do I kiss your back? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. Like, I feel very uncomfortable, and I'm sure you do too. And also
it's
social
weird.
distancing. Yeah, and also 6 feet away. You can blow kisses at the shirt. Is that what we're going to be doing now? Blowing kisses at icons? I hope not. That would be sad.
That's terrible and also a hilarious image.
Yeah.
Do a prostration and just sort of,
love you.
Oh, God, help us. Oh, man.
Jesus, I'm social distancing from Jesus. 6 feet, Jesus. Please. Show some respect. Please respect my boundaries, Lord.
We've all been social distancing from Jesus for a long time, and only now is it coming out.
I have been doing all the distancing from him. Social, emotional, spiritual.
I am the greatest
financial.
of distancers. Financial.
Yeah. That's my money. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff here. Maybe there's something providential and prophetic about this, if we have the eyes to see it.
Yeah, I think that it does bring to question, right? Like, for us, like what is reality versus a reality that we've constructed, and like what's it going to take for us to come back to, to snap back to reality? Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes Rabbit. He choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy.
You. This guy pop cultures.
I do. I've done it once or twice. I am wearing a shirt that says, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." I don't know if you can see that.
Nice. I like it. I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt.
We did it.
Ouch.
Look at us.
Yeah. So pop culture.
Veritable icons of pop culture, you and I. Not idols.
I will not
icons.
kiss your shirt.
Pointing beyond ourselves to the demiurge that is pop culture.
In this case, Disney, which owns all things and fills all things.
Yeah. Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah.
But I
sad.
think that, yes, indeed, that perhaps one of the things we need to maybe talk about, because we're quickly dwindling the time here. I can't even believe it. There's so many things to discuss.
I love how off script we are. Like, that was actually like, we just kind of went into this. This was,
not even thought about. But I do want to talk about the kind of the importance of like the mind itself, which I feel like is such an interesting dynamic here, right? Because I feel like there was a lot of questions of just like basic anthropology and, what does it mean really to, like, what does the mind mean for being a human person? What's kind of like the significance of it? What's the relationship between the person and the mind? Like, is the person the mind? And then of course, even the question of the brain, the mind, and like the body / brain, right? Because there's all this question of like, if they go down to limbo, like they're going to forget who they are. If they go to that bottom level of consciousness, like even though his brain would be totally functioning when he comes out of it, he'll have been gone for so long that it's likely that his mind will have turned to mush. So it's I don't know, man. I throw those things at you and allow you to do your thing. Yeah,
you served, and now I will volley. So I think the first thing to tease out, which I think is really interesting, is that there is this difference between the mind and the brain, right? Which I think like sometimes, depending on a kind of our assumptions, we can sort of like forget that or kind of assume that the mind simply is the brain, right? But there's something clearly non-physical that's happening in the world as it's being presented to us in this movie, whatever this universe is. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily spiritual, right? I don't know that there's necessarily kind of like a spiritual reality that is at play in Inception, but there's definitely a level of non-materiality. Like there's some sort of, it's kind of like the first thing that comes to mind is like if you think of book 7 of Harry Potter, right? When Harry is having that conversation with Dumbledore in King's Cross Station, and at the end of it, like he turns to Dumbledore and he says, like, "Is this happening in my mind?" And Dumbledore gives him the smile and says, like, "Yeah, but why would that make it any less real?"
Right.
Like there's kind of a very non-physical reality that is happening here, but that is very real and that has very real consequences for a person. Like when Saito, who again, he gets shot on that last job, and he's like slowly bleeding out, which is only sort of delayed as they go deeper and deeper into the dream. And when he dies in the thing, like his mind is perfectly healthy, his body is perfectly healthy, but he goes somewhere, right? And again, they don't tease that out because again, it doesn't seem like there's a level of spirituality or like there isn't necessarily like they don't play with the idea of like is there a god or some sort of like force that's out there. But there definitely is something non-material which can't be ignored. I don't know if it operates merely in the sense of like emotions. I don't know if it operates merely in the sense of kind of like a psychological sense of self. But even so, it's a not purely material sense of self, which is kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, I think that's where the question almost of like, is it a question of memory or like experience of some kind? Because like, even the way that Cobb talks about Mal when they come back, right? Like she had been an old soul and returned to a young body. Like that would kind of do this. I mean, it would really do a number on you, right? Like to kind of be like, well, I lived into my 80s or whatever, kind of in this
for
thing
50
and like
years,
for 50 years, and now I wake up and it's just 5 hours later or whatever. Like what do I do with that, all of that experience, and like in some real way that was real, but it also was totally not, but it still had a real deep impact on me, even to the point, right, where we learn like the power of that idea that takes root in her, of that your world is not real. Like that, first of all, how horrifying would that be to like have something in your subconscious that you just couldn't do anything about, right? Like it's just there, and to be plagued with this constant. I mean, it actually made me sick to my stomach last night as I was watching, thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, like, ugh, to have some idea implanted in my subconscious that like I can't get rid of. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Especially one that undermines everything that you experience on a daily basis. Like your world is not real, right? That again, that's like that Cartesian extreme skepticism. Like it's and again, the way that if you're ever into like philosophy or something, if you read Rene Descartes, I can't remember what his meditations on philosophy or something like that. He's totally skeptical about everything, and he does this little sort of like very dishonest feint at the very end, and he's like, well, yeah, but like there's no demon that's in my mind that's telling me that I'm not real. Like clearly I'm real. And it's he resolves this otherwise like existential burden, existential crisis in a very sort of cheap way. Because I think if you take it seriously, like, and you just sort of doubt everything, like that is a horrifying thing. It's a totally horrifying thing.
Yes, it absolutely.
Meditations on First Philosophy. That's the one. It's the Green Book. I had in college the Green Book. I can't remember what it was. Meditations on First Philosophy. Yeah.
There we go.
Philosophy nerds.
Pop culture philosophy hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what I was saying, but it's fine. It probably didn't matter all that much.
No, I'm sorry.
No, it does. It really probably didn't. Just that the brain is funny and the mind is hard. You
were horrified. You were sick to your stomach yesterday when you were watching this movie because of this idea that you don't have control of, that is placed in your subconscious, and like it's just there, and you can't extract it. It's there. It's placed against your will.
Yeah. So I guess like what I was coming to is like that there's this like you said, this kind of non-material component that I don't know that like on one level, I think I totally can understand, because there's people like you meet that are like almost wise beyond their years, right? Like there's something that's almost like aged in them that you're like, how are you so wise and discerning and whatever it may be? And I feel like there is kind of this like charism that comes from the Holy Spirit for many people, right? That like they're able to like see and discern things clearly, but it like exists in this way of like, or a child that says something really profound, that's able to cut through the core of some really deep truth about something, and they don't know how to add. Like there's something that's really like uniquely fascinating about like the spiritual mind versus kind of like the developmental brain. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm,
because it's incongruous, right? Like you would not expect that level of truth out of a kid who can barely tie his or her shoes, right? You would not expect that level of truth out of somebody who's in his or her 20s or something like that.
right.
Yeah.
This like this deep like sense of like the way that the world is, right? Like of how reality actually functions. It's just it's crazy, and then how easily that can also just be messed with. How easily we can kind of have those base beliefs about the world, and not even just like I believe in God or I don't believe in God, but like basic beliefs of like people are essentially good or people are essentially bad. Like those are deep subconscious beliefs that impact and inform the way we navigate our relationships and the way we navigate the world. I mean, it's wild just how deep of an impact that actually has.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about like where they come from, right? Like where do they come from? Because I think on some level, you can say that there are some things that are just kind of core to who we are as people, core sort of longings or core sort of instincts that are sort of placed there by virtue of the fact that we're made in the image and likeness. Like to the extent that we seek beauty in our lives, it's because we were made by the one who is beautiful. To the extent that we seek truth in our lives, it's because we are made by the one who is truth. And there's like, it's like a meta rational, non-rational, like there's something just sort of so deep and fundamental. Like if you think about an argument that sort of like strips it down to its premises, like there's some things that kind of are premises in themselves that don't rely upon anything else, right? Just like these core longings, which we hope, like to the extent that they are good longings, that they're sort of implanted in us by virtue of the fact that we are images of the Lord. But I wonder about the way that traumas or other sorts of things can actually like affect even those things and can cause us to be self-destructive. Rather than seeking health, we seek destruction. Rather than seeking life, we seek death. Rather than, seeking peace and harmony amongst people, we seek sort of discord, and we seek to Zoom bomb or whatever it is. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Because those things are like so deep and they're not like premised upon anything else. Like they're so deep and foundational. There's kind of a reverence and an awe around them.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is probably why, the kind of the concept of Inception is itself so kind of wacky, right? Because like what's happening there is you're actually trying to manipulate somebody's kind of like deepest way of perceiving reality and perceiving the world so that they will act toward an end that benefits you. Like that's, I mean,
evil.
It's so evil. Like Inception it's a cool movie, but at the end of the day, you're cheering for the bad guys.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies that you're like, oh, go bad guys, go. I hope they win. And meanwhile, this poor guy, like they're just messing with his brain. And like, it's messed up.
It's totally messed up.
It's Ocean's 11, but like on a meaner scale,
DiCaprio should have stuck with Growing Pains. It's all been downhill since, I'm telling you.
Him and Kirk Cameron just hanging out together.
Yeah. But so there's I think the thing that is so unsettling about it is that there's something objectifying or manipulative about it, right? Like you think even the way that it's presented in this movie, because this is a very abstract concept. And one of the cool things about this movie is the way that abstract concepts are presented in very kind of tangible terms. Like you are getting to the deepest part of a person, layers and layers and layers down. They're ultimately going to like the house where you think of the inception of of Maul, right? Like they go to the house that she grew up in. Like there's something so central to who she is, and there's this like safe that's hidden in the way of the dollhouse, like all of these layers, right? Like the level of intimacy and innocence, like it's her childhood dollhouse, right? Like that's where this thing is being planted. It really like underscores just how manipulative and what an invasion it is. And
into the basic, most foundational part of her psyche,
yeah,
where she grew up, like we know how much the childhood impacts our thoughts and minds and sense of who we are.
Totally. And here's a tough question that you brought up about this too, right? Because like, to what extent, and this is a question that like Andy Root has brought up, right? To what extent is the way that we do ministry kind of like an attempt to riff on this and actually sort of incept kids or incept young people to make sure that we are planting these kind of like good thoughts or good assumptions or whatever it is into them, to the deepest part of them, so that when they go off into the world, they're doing our bidding or coming to conclusions that we want them to conclude, right? As opposed to something more healthy.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that like what, is so important to this, right, is that idea of inception versus like this conversion of the heart, right? Like where we begin to allow Christ and even ask him to transform the way that we see things, to change the way that we see things. Because we're open to him, we're not just like being invaded. Like he stands at the door and knocks, but we have to like actually open it, right? We have to let him into the safe and let him spin the top and like mess with our minds a little bit and renew the way that we think and change the way that we think. But he's not gonna like, go full Leo DiCaprio here and snoop around for it.
Yeah. It's it's conversion is much more of a face-to-face thing. Like when Christ comes to Paul on the road to Damascus, he doesn't sort of like sneakily reach into his rucksack, right, and kind of like do a weird little thing with the top that he's carrying around or something ridiculous. Like he knocks him off his horse and he's like, hey, here I am, and you're gonna have to deal with this now.
Yeah, exactly. It's that element of the person rather than kind of like, how do I get Paul to think Christian thoughts? Like, is there a way to, and then he'll be able to fly. Like, it's just,
let's have a pizza party.
Yeah.
And sort of distract them with a piñata. And then meanwhile over here, a little bit of Jesus.
Yeah. And then we'll get back to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then, it's all just like, it's craziness. Man, there's so much that we could talk about in this movie. I can't believe that it's already almost time to call it quits, but
yeah,
I do think that as far maybe as kind of like one closing note here, I think that I do think that one closing kind of like important thing that's here is this idea, I think, of the trauma, right, that we all kind of carry. I can't believe we didn't even get into the theory about whether or not this is all just in Cobb's mind entirely, right? That even all of the other people are just projections of his, which is a cool theory. But anyway, the reality is like there's something that Cobb is working through. There's something that is working, and that is actually what we know a lot about dreams. Like dreams are just kind of like a way of emotional processing. So even now lately, there's been like this study that came out where people were being interviewed about like what they're dreaming about in an age of pandemic. And a lot of them were saying that they've been dreaming that something is chasing them, and that, or they've been pursued by something, or they can't get away from someone's trying to grab them, or like whatever it might, like something like this, which totally is what's happening right now. Like everyone's like, oh, this thing is out there to get me, and like we got to get away from the virus, and we got to whatever. But of course, in a dream, it's not going to be like that realistic. It's going to be like, oh, there's a monster, or like some thief or something, right? And so there is this way of, I think, that we begin to process our emotions kind of while we're sleeping. Like we dream through them so that we can store them as past events. But when that doesn't happen and we begin reliving them, that's when they're traumas. They're not just memories, they're traumas. They're things that
are present.
We re-experience because they haven't been separated from like our present mindedness into the past. They're not a part of like our narrative. And so that's why it's interesting. Cobb keeps going back, trying to fix those things. Like he has those things stored in his brain, and he goes back and keeps trying to relive them. And if you really kind of think about what this movie is about, it's all about things not going the way that he expected. Like it really is all about at every turn, right? Well, I thought that we were going to be going into this and it was going to be easy and we were going to be able to do because he's going in to do Inception correctly now. Like that's the whole point of this, is to do it without loss and without cost and without whatever. Now everything is entirely costly. We have to go deep. Someone could die and they could be stuck there forever. Oh, what happens the moment that we arrive? The guy who's going to give him his freedom is shot. Like there's so many moments of like re-experiencing the trauma and the loss that he's gone through, right? His whole life depends on this guy coming out of this. And now this is the very dude that is like most in danger of dying, much in the same way that like his whole life kind of depended on something sticking with his wife, but it ends up going too far, maybe, and, you know, taking her away. So I do think there's something really, really fascinating about like, there's something that needs to be resolved. There's something that needs to be kind of corrected in all of this.
Yeah. And it's potentially like a very vivid example of something that is unhealthy. So like, this is something that I learned in therapy over the course of the last year and a half. Like I kind of found myself in some ways dwelling upon things in the way that like Cobb was dwelling upon things, and not simply like feeling sadness, right, about a loss or feeling sadness about a whatever, but sort of going back and playing different scenarios and sort of like digging into it and wrestling with it and sort of internalizing it, and like a wagon wheel, you know, going through the mud, just sort of making these ruts and these negative thought patterns deeper. Mm-hmm. Like there's something about the fact that he's bringing this upon himself, because he constantly goes back into that basement, and he's, you know, when Ellen Page's character stays late at work, you know, he's putting himself under so he can go and engage with Maul. It's like he's constantly putting himself in a position where he's reliving these things, and he's only making the trauma that much worse. And he's not processing them. He's just kind of like scratching the wound open again rather than letting it heal. And that's something I found I was doing in my own life, just to sort of not experience feelings of loss or feelings of guilt or feelings of whatever, but to actually like get into them. Which is not part of the healing process, and again is actually like a way that we remove ourselves from what is and double down on what is not. Like, what if things were different? That loss would have never happened. What if things were whatever? Another way that we just sort of live in this fantasy land of our own creation, which actually kind of like can lead to further trauma and dysregulation and all that.
Right. And what's interesting too, right? I think that like the wounds and the hurts from the past that we carry, if we allow them, like they really can be instructive to us, and they really can be the means by which we're spiritually healed, right? Like they truly can do that. Obviously, I mean, I think that we don't want to just needlessly suffer. Like I'm not one of those people that's like, well, like everything that happens for a reason, and like you got to live with it and you whatever. But like I do think that there's something that's different about like Cobb trying to fix the trauma, trying to relive it, trying to, like you're saying, just kind of scratching the surface off again and reopening the wound, versus what ends up happening in the very end is when he's holding her and he comes face to face with reality, right? He's like, you're not her. How could I ever, you know, like you're the best that I could do, but I couldn't possibly capture all of her perfection, all of her imperfection, like all of the thing. And he goes, I have to leave because she's not real. Like, and that is where there's this moment where he takes up the cross, right? And he accepts his guilt instead of trying to fix it. He accepts his loss instead of trying to fix it. And finally, there's something there where he can move on in some capacity, to the point where even if he sees his children's face in the end and it is a dream, he's at least willing to accept the new dream rather than to keep reliving the nightmare, right? Yeah. Like there's something powerful to that component as well. Because either way, what's happened is that the trauma has been resolved. And he's moved on, even if he's not in the same reality, right?
Yeah, and that is an interesting, again, like example of him choosing reality over the figment of his imagination. Like he doubles down on his love for his wife rather than the inadequacy of the projection. She's like, I love her, not the false image of her that I've created. And I can sort of leave this false image behind out of love for her.
So, and this is even a more an interesting thing that you're bringing up too, because that's exactly what Fisher's path is as well, is to think that like letting go of this thing that was an inheritance is actually the way to show love to his father and to honor his father. Like that's the thing that happens here. And so that's what happens parallel time with Cobb letting go of Mal, right? Like that this is the way he actually honors who she really is by like letting go of the thing that, you know, he's built up in his mind about. Dude, it all happens inside of his freaking head. It's all Cobb.
You think so?
Cobb. I think it's all Cobb. It's all Cobb trying to work through it.
So at the very end, when the top is wobbling, you don't think it topples over. You think it keeps going.
That very well might be real. Yeah. Everything else though in the movie, that might be the only real moment that we've got.
Oh, okay. You think even Fisher and all of those guys are not real?
I think they're all. I think that he was just on a first class trip back to his family, and he was on the plane. That's why they're all the projections that he has in there, because they were just sitting in first class with him.
Yeah,
and you know, it is what it is, or something. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Interesting.
I think it's him working through his trauma.
There's definitely a layer to that, because that's what he does do. And it is very cool that there's all these parallel things and parallel sort of healings that are happening at the same time. It's a good story. It's a really good story.
So good. Well, we have 5 minutes left. Should we do a little Q&A? Brief Q&A?
Totally. The chat is open. Feel free to leave a comment, leave a chat. Once again, thank you to Raphael, who added in the chat meditations on first philosophy to ground us on the right path with our Cartesian musings. So I appreciate that, Raphael.
Doesn't look like anyone has anything for us.
If not, it's okay.
Do you have a little ditty you would like to sing for us? I'm sure you do.
Me?
Yeah, why don't you sing us a little ditty?
I will sing you the shortest ditty that I can think of. By Menon.
That was really short.
That was very short. It's the shortest one I can think of. Also, Costanza.
Also short.
Yeah. Monica asks a question. Homework for next week. So Christian and I have been thinking about this for a while. Next week is Holy Week. So one of the ideas that's on the table is to not like do a thing, not talk about a movie, not talk about a TV show or anything, but just kind of like have it be pop culture check-in hour and just kind of talk about how we're doing with the state of the culture and the state of the world. And we'll be halfway through Holy Week at that point and just sort of be people together rather than like talk about a thing. So no homework, in other words, for the class. Just be people. Monica's like, yes, no homework.
You're free. You all get A's next week.
Yeah. Yes. Nathaniel asks a question. What do you think about all the movies getting pushed back in terms of release dates because of the state of the world? Is that what you mean, Nathaniel?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, because some of them are getting pushed back. Some of them are being released directly online, right? So I think it's kind of a mixed bag. If nothing else, maybe there's like an element of hope that is reflected in that. Like people want to take some of these blockbusters and they want to have the cinematic experience. And there's some things that they want to release in a theater where people are shoulder to shoulder, popcorn in hand, really having that classic movie experience. So I see it as kind of a really like minor, but beautiful example of hope. Like there will be a day when we get to experience these things on the big screen, shoulder to shoulder with people chewing too loud over next to us and, you know, shouting, "Don't go in there," and the other annoying audience things. But
I've never been to one where they actually said "Don't go in there."
Oh, I've had multiples of that. It is hilarious, like the first 2 times, and then it's just like, stop it now. That's my thought. Do you have a thought on Nathaniel's question, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think it's better than them releasing them in the theaters now and people going and watching them. But I don't know, like with everything, like there's nothing normal about any of this, you know. It's all weird, and it probably all should be weird, because that's just the best I think that any of us can do with it.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because there are movies that like I would probably prefer to see in the theater. So I'm glad that we'll get that opportunity again.
Totally.
Theater movies are fun, man. I like them.
They are. They are. One day we'll be back. All right. That seems like it might be it for now.
I think so. I think so.
So no homework for next week. Just be a human being until then. And then we'll talk about what it is to be a human being.
Now go be excellent to each other.
Nice reference. Bye, everybody.
Man. Take care.